As my dad would say, he's like, so you're basically going to be either a farmer or a businesswoman. Is that the consensus?
Yeah, that's like the same vibe I get from you all the time. How's my hair?
How's my hair?
Your hair always looks good. All right. How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In this one, we're going to be interviewing my friend Natalia. Say hello, Natalia.
Hi, guys.
She is an entrepreneur of about, how long was it? How long ago did you start the business?
A little bit over a year and a half ago now.
Okay. And she owns an e-commerce boutique online store, but also does quite a bit of wholesale, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
And what's the name of the business?
It's called Nat and Noor.
Okay. Nat and Noor, link below in the description if you want to buy a lot of cool jewelry stuff. So the purpose of this video specifically, the things that have helped me the most in my entrepreneurial journey is listening to other people's stories, literally what they did on a day-to-day basis, instead of just trying to hear somebody tell me what to do to start a business, seeing the show rather than the tell. And so today I wanted to show you guys how Natalia was able to start this business from scratch with no prior business experience, correct?
Yeah, not a little bit, just a little bit of entrepreneurial things before I started this. But other than that, it's pretty been forged my own path.
Got it. So and I think that's pretty much everyone's story. Like every entrepreneur when they were a kid was like the one doing the lemonade stand or like doing some extra things on the side to make money, right?
Definitely.
But anyways, we're going to talk about where she came from and where she is now, and hopefully get a lot of awesome nuggets for you guys to take away and put into practice with your own businesses. Natalia, before we jump into that, let's just hear a little bit of background on yourself. Where are you from? How old are you? And what's your education background?
So I grew up in Utah, and I'm 27, turning 28 in September. My dad is a business consultant, so I did kind of grow up with a lot of just business conversation at the dinner table, and I think that probably sparked a lot. And he's always been an entrepreneur in a way as well, starting his own consulting firms and also consulting for a lot of different businesses. So I did have that background as well.
Yeah.
But then I went to school at BYU, Hawaii. I was out there for over 4 years studying oil painting, actually. So I got a degree in the fine arts, which, you probably wouldn't think would then go on to do business. But even during that time, I took some entrepreneurial classes, and I had some connections with actually some volunteer entrepreneur teachers that were retired and teaching at BYU Hawaii, and became friends with them and their families. So I definitely think that it's always been kind of in the back of my mind.
Yeah. Really cool. And I think, just like you said, I grew up in a family of like family businesses. My brother owns a business. My sister owns an accounting practice. My parents own a business. And when you kind of grow up with that mindset, it's harder to settle, right? Yeah. And so I think it's really cool. And I did know that about your dad, but I didn't realize that we both had that same growing up experience, which affects a lot of entrepreneurs, I think.
Definitely.
And the other question I had is, you're pretty into like sustainability and like eco-friendly things, right? Mm-hmm. When did you start getting into that?
That's a good question. I feel like I've definitely always been pretty passionate about like holistic nutrition, and then living in Hawaii, I think it's hard not to just like really care about the land. And most people who live in Hawaii and love it are pretty conscious of waste and the environment. So that probably maybe cultivated a little bit more while I was in school in Hawaii.
Got it. Makes sense. Really cool. So you went to school, and then after that you came back, and the time when you started getting the idea for this business was when you were working a job, right?
Yeah. So I graduated from BYU Hawaii, and then I had a art degree, and I came home and I'm like, okay, well, what can I do with this? And I started teaching painting lessons at the Sundance Mountain Resort. But then they quickly gave me all the other art classes. So I started teaching silversmithing, printmaking, watercolor, even photography. But the silversmithing was one that I just like really, really loved, and I could go after hours and start making jewelry as well. And then I would start to sell that jewelry to Sundance. And so that's where my experience in wholesale kind of started to come into play.
Got it. So you like started teaching these classes. And by the way, for anybody that's not from Utah, Sundance is a ski resort, but during the like summer or fall months, they'll like do classes up there, right? Or like,
right.
It's a great place to hike. And so you'd like teach your classes, and then you'd stay after hours and make like, they were just like these necklaces, right?
They were, actually, I kind of have, I can show you right here. They're like silver bracelets.
Get it close to the camera. Yeah.
They're, like Native American jewelry, basically. And I really liked the bracelets because I would wear them all the time. They were super easy to make. I would go and stay until like sometimes midnight. No one would be up there, and just crank out bracelets. And then the next day I would put them in their display case. They would sell them. It was a 60-40 cut. I got 60, they got 40, and I was like, wow, this is doing really well, and I love it. So
yeah,
I could see the wheels turning, you know?
Yeah, that's super cool. So then what happened after that?
After that, so there's kind of a lot of things that I've done in between that time. I had done a lot of catering actually with my mom. Me and my mom started this catering business, and it started by word of mouth. We were asked to do a lot of weddings. And then also, since my dad had his own business and was constantly meeting up with businesses, he would have me and my mom cater for business events.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So I was doing that on the side. I was making jewelry on the side. And then I also got into making wedding cakes on the side. Well, I guess they're just a piece of the pie, you know, but I was pretty busy constantly juggling a lot of things. And then I also taught yoga as well, like 10 classes a week sometimes. And oh man, what else? I'm sure there's other things going on. It was fun, but pretty crazy.
Yeah, I'm sure. So how did that end up turning into like one business that you pursued and to make a profit?
Right. So I think at that time I had to decide not to keep teaching at Sundance, and it was kind of more of an on-call situation. So I decided to let that go and concentrate on the other things. And I got to a point where I knew that I was like ready for a shift, and I was ready for like one focus. So I took probably like 8 months to figure out what the next focus would be. And I started to explore like different grad programs. I was talking to a lot of professors of environmental science. I even spent a few months in Australia with some permaculture people. Yeah. I explored a lot of different routes. But I think in the back of my mind, I just always knew that like I had this passion for business. And right before I left to Australia, I was seeing like these acetate earrings that I thought were really cool. And I just thought I would order some samples. I knew it would take a long time for them to ship to me anyway. So I was like, I'm going to order them before I go to Australia. Mm-hmm. They'll be back at my house by the time I get back from Australia. And then I'll kind of go from there and see. So I was kind of thinking while I was in Australia, I would be contemplating this idea if I wanted to be, as my dad would say, he's like, so you're basically going to be either a farmer or a businesswoman. Is that the consensus?
Yeah, that's like the same vibe I get from you all the time. It's like, I can't tell if she's just like a tree hugger or she loves business. And I think it's both.
Yeah, it really is both. So it's an interesting combination. But yeah.
So you were exploring like all these different opportunities, which by the way, I'm really glad you brought that up, because I think everybody that eventually becomes an entrepreneur, like they know that deep in their heart, like someday I want to do that. And that's the same way I was. I was like, oh, I know I'm going to start a business someday, but I just kept putting it off. And I think it's because our culture just says like how risky business is. Like, oh, you know, 9 in 10 businesses fail within the first year, and you hear all these like doomsday messages about business, and so you kind of go to it as a last resort. But I wish I had gone sooner, because in my mind, there's really no way to fail. There's just like the first failure is just feedback, and then you just keep going and keep going and keep going, right?
Totally.
So you ordered the samples, and by the way, where did you order? Like, just pretend you're talking to somebody that has never heard anything about e-commerce. Where did you order that? How does that process work?
Right. So there's a few different routes that you can go. There's so many different sites. Most of them are manufacturer sites for Asia. I'm actually hoping in the next few years that there's going to be some better manufacturer sites for different parts of the world, because that's, I think, a huge gap right now in our supply chain system for entrepreneurs. Yeah. But one of them is just called like Alibaba. There's a few, there's a difference between like a supplier, a wholesaler, and a manufacturer. So you need to know the difference, and you need to make sure that you're getting it as close to the source as possible, or else your price is going to be a lot higher than it needs to be.
Got it. So for example, if I was you selling on a site and I got from a supplier instead of from a wholesaler, I'd probably be buying at $5, let's say, and selling for $7 or $8, where the seller is getting it from another wholesaler at $2.
Right. Yeah. So there's a lot of middlemen in the equation. Even when you are talking to a manufacturer in Asia, they usually have kind of like a broker that you're going through that maybe have connections with multiple manufacturers. So it is a complicated process, and it's definitely worth doing your homework on, I'd say.
Got it. But so pretty much you just went on Alibaba and you ordered you're like, oh, I like these acetate earrings, and you ordered a few samples.
Right. Yeah.
Cool. Basically. And how long did it take to get to your house?
Oh man, my sister did give me a call while I was in Australia. She's like, you got these weird earrings in the mail. And I was like, no, that's what I wanted. Yeah. Probably took up to a month, or sometimes more though. Got it.
So then you came back from Australia. I love this story. This was like, this is how you went to market, right? Like the next day you came home and you sold all of them, right?
Yeah. I had this like epiphany when I was in Australia, and I was like, helping these people with their gardens and their farms. And I was just kind of thinking like, does it really matter? Like, what should I do? And I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to go for it. Why not? And so the day I got back from Australia, I didn't have any job lined up, anything going on, basically. So I was like, well, I'm starting this business today. And I got out the earrings. I took a couple pictures, and just on my personal Instagram, which is less than 2,000 people, I was like, guys, I'm doing this open house. I'm starting a business. You can come. My mom is also making bread, which probably is the reason most people came. But then I have some cool friends, so they came and supported me. And I definitely wasn't trying to sell to anyone necessarily. I was just kind of pitching this idea and curious what the reaction would be, especially I just kind of wanted feedback in general. And I had probably 20 earrings, and I kind of lined them up, made them look nice. And my friends that came, they're like, okay, what are you doing? And they actually almost all sold that night. Wow. And I don't think they were pity purchases. I really think my friends liked them. Mm-hmm. So I was like, sweet, I'm doing this. I'm in business. Yeah. Sorry,
camera battery died, so we're back on. I just want to point out to everybody here, a lot of people think you need to spend thousands and thousands of dollars to start a business. You're not going to be profitable within years. You're going to have to wait so long, and then you're waiting for this big payout down the line. But just to point out what Natalia did, she literally spent, how much did you spend on those samples, would you say?
Oh, less than $20 for sure.
All right. She spent less than $20. And then that night, how much did you make?
Probably close to $200.
Yeah. So that's $180. That's not a life-changing amount of money, but it was a life-changing amount of money because that first sale is honestly the hardest one to get. And once you get it, you realize hey, there's actually demand for this. And then you just the snowball keeps gathering more and more snow, and you start to realize how you can keep selling these to more and more people. And I love that you hosted at your parents' house and got people to come to this open house. There's so many ways. People just don't understand there's so many ways to start a business without any capital. and very little experience as well. And it's just an awesome origin story there. I love it. So anyways, you sold all of those, and then that night you were like, you saw the money signs, you decided this was like your life's path, or what happened?
Yeah, I was like, well, it looks like people like them. Like, I could tell that they actually did like the earrings. And I was like, well, the margins are pretty good from what I understand, you know? And at that point, I had one thing that I think about a lot, actually, that stops people as well, is this concept of like, I felt almost really lucky that I had nothing to lose at that point. I had no job, I had, not married, no kids to support. Like, I had nothing to lose. And so I was like, why not? You know? And I think that I don't think you have to be necessarily at that point, but I think what stops a lot of people is that this job security of like a 9-to-5 is so hard to let go of. And also maybe even like social pressure of having to tell people, oh, I'm starting this business. And you really do. I mean, every scenario is different, but I would say, like, in my mind, I was like, I'm giving myself 6 to 8 months to make pretty much no money. Yeah. Like, I was not worried about, like I said, I'm not even gonna like worry at all about how much I'm making for the first like 6 to 8 months. And that's hard. Most people like can't, like, it's hard to get yourself to do that.
Yeah, it's hard to get in a financial situation where that's viable. Right. Because like the average American has less than like $100 saved or something crazy like that. Yeah. And so it's definitely huge, and it's a big mindset shift for a lot of people going into business. Like, they think, I need money right now, therefore I'm going to start a business. And you can make money, and you should make money right away. But honestly, I just like, if you're at a very scarce mindset, you need money right away, you're not going to have the collection, like if you're doing person-to-person sales, you're not going to be collected on your sales calls. You're going to be like, oh, I need this to close. Yeah. Therefore, I'm like super anxious, and it comes across to the prospect. Totally. And it comes across in your work. It comes across in the way that you're doing things. And, and then there's like the other side of the spectrum I've seen where I heard this story about this guy who was like $80,000 in credit card debt and a car loan, I think. And he hadn't told his wife anything. And he just finally decided it was time to get out of debt. And so he would work his 9-to-5 job. He'd hang out with his family, and then he'd work from like 10 to 1 in the morning. And then eventually now he runs a business that makes him like $60,000 to $100,000 a month. Wow. But it was, there's like these two sides of the spectrum where you and I, when we started, we didn't really have many financial obligations, but sometimes people get so far on the other end that they're like, I have to start this business. And then they end up starting it on top of their current job, which is really difficult in my opinion. Right. But, everybody has their own story, which works. And at the end of the day, as long as you can be profitable and help people, that's why we're in business. Right.
Yeah. And that being said, I would say, like, don't let that stop you. If you're like, well, I don't think I'm really willing to like not make any money for 6 to 8 months. Like you said, I think there's so many different scenarios out there. So there's people who are working and then hustling on the side. There's a lot of different scenarios, but that just happened to be, I think, work for my benefit.
Yeah. And was it 6 to 8 months before you started to make good money? How long did it take?
No, and that's like the interesting thing. Because I had no attachment to it, I was like not very attached to how much was coming in, but I actually was able to totally pay for rent and food, and was making, I'm not a big spender in general, so like I was making more than I was spending still, but it depends what your budget is, I guess. Yeah.
I just read about this the other day in Viktor Frankl's book, A Man's Search for Meaning. Have you read that?
Oh, I love that book.
Yeah, he talks about something called the paradox of intention, where people they have so much anxiety over something that because of that anxiety, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, like sleeping, like, oh, I can't sleep, I have insomnia. And they just sit there and worry about it. And so what he tells them to do is try not to fall asleep. And then because of that, they fall asleep. Wow. Which is super interesting, right? So it's kind of like, oh, because I don't need to make money, you end up making more money because you don't want it so bad. It's like this other quote, what we resist persists. And the opposite of that is also true. Like what we want so bad that we chase it so often and we can't stop thinking about it usually tends to evade us.
Oh, it's so true. I can think about like so many situations in my life. Yeah. That's interesting.
Well, cool. So those first few months you were making pretty good money. But what did you go once after that first night? What happened?
Okay, so the first night I was like, yeah, I'm doing this. And then I was like, okay, well, I know I need to like I need to put it out there, get it out there. And I started an Instagram for it. And I also threw it up on Etsy because I was like, okay, Etsy already has traffic coming in. Like I don't have any traffic right now. So maybe I'll throw it up on Etsy. I talked to a friend who did Etsy ads and he was kind of like instructing me on how to, get the best bang for your buck basically with that Etsy ads. So I threw them up on Etsy, started an Instagram. I also reached out to like, I think like just using your network really, because I had a few friends who have a lot of like a big following on social media, and I reached out to them, as well as even some of my siblings are influencers. So I was like, hey, help a sister out, like, can you, which now like looking back, I'm like, man, they're so nice to me because it was so scrappy. Like it was just like these janky pictures of these earrings and they're like, sure, Nat, we'll do this for you. But now I'm like, wow, that was some serious love because it did not look that great at that point.
And I think that's another really good point is like you were using the skills that you had gained, like you went to college for art, right? And then you did the silversmithing, you really loved it. And even though you're not making all your jewelry right now, like you knew something about it. You liked it. You knew like what you mentioned earlier to me, like how to make it like the materials, which ones are sustainable or not, right?
Right. Yeah.
So then you also used your network, like your existing network. And I think a lot of people think I can't start a business because I don't have all this background or any of these things. But in reality, if they looked in their background, something that they're passionate about, something they know more about than the average person, and then they thought about maybe 5 or 6 people who might be able to tell them something about that, within a week, you're 10 times closer to making a profit than, if you just sit on your butt and you don't do anything about it.
Totally. Yeah, that was actually a mindset that I went into it with, was that I was like, you know what? I'm going to ask like so many questions. And I started just thinking, like brainstorming, like who do I know who's like started a business? Who do I know like in any category, any kind of connection that I had that would make sense to reach out to them for my business? And I guess that's also like one of my strengths is I'm not really afraid to ask questions. And I don't think I'm very afraid of rejection, which I think you kind of have to some level, just like a thick skin, because some, like, you're going to be rejected. Some people are not going to be open to talk about things, and I like totally respect that as well. So I think if you reach out I would ask as many questions as you can. And then if someone isn't open to talk to you, like just be super nice and be like, no, I totally understand. That's cool. Like, thanks for like, thanks for being my friend, I guess. I don't know.
Thanks for replying. When I was starting out, I did the same thing, reached out to a guy who would run pretty much the ssame business as me. And I was like, how much for an hour of your time? And it was $200, but best $200 I ever spent. It was like such a smart move on my part. And I had no clue, that it was going to turn out so good for me. But that mentorship and just like talking to somebody who can like fix your mindset issues about it is like part of the best investment you can make, honestly.
Yeah. Oh, I totally agree.
You had like your bread night where you sold all your friends, you made $200. Then you set up an Instagram, then you set up an Etsy. Yeah. Then what?
So at this point, maybe I should also mention that I was still teaching like 3 art classes a week for this like community center. So I had a little bit of money coming in from that as well. But from there, my aunt actually had been staying at my parents' house. She's like, it was so random. She's never done that before. And that morning we were talking about business, and I told her that I was starting this business, and she had told me about this lady who sold an e-commerce course, and she's like, you should really look into it, maybe just like watch some of her YouTube videos and see if it connects. And like when she was telling me this, I was like grateful, but in my mind I was like, there's no way, no. But I started like watching the videos, and I was kind of like, man, like I think she has some good stuff to say. And also, maybe I need to humble myself and realize that like I'm gonna need a lot. I think I knew I needed help, but I just didn't realize it would come in that form of like taking an e-commerce course.
Yeah.
But I ended up buying the course, and that was probably like 4 months after the initial starting of my business.
And how much was the course?
The course was $1,000. And at that point, that's why when you're first starting, you're kind of like, oh, is it worth it? Because I'm like, not really making that much, you know? Yeah. But it was the best decision I ever made.
Wow.
For sure. Because she just gives you like a roadmap. And I think we were kind of saying the other day, it just is like sometimes when you're starting a business, you feel like you're just like throwing darts wherever. You're like, okay, well, someone told me about Facebook ads, I should do that. Or someone tells you about this, or you hear this. But for someone to just like give you a roadmap so that you know that you're like actually aiming for a target is so valuable.
Oh yeah. And those were the only startup costs that I used to start my marketing agency, was a personal mentor that I could meet with one-on-one, and then an online course. And they get a bad rap sometimes, but honestly, if you find the right mentor, you find the right course, so valuable. Best investment you'll ever make, just like you said.
Yeah, totally. It was a game changer. And I think even just like the motivation where she would do a Facebook Live every Friday, you get on there, you could ask questions, and she like to just know that there's like at least 200 other people on there like doing the same thing that you're doing, and you're like, okay, sweet, like this is a real thing, like I'm doing a real thing here.
Yeah, it's so easy to just get in your head, especially in those first like low income months. Like for me, I was just like sitting at my computer, just like banging my head on a laptop all day. And when you're like, no, this is a proven business model, like people have done it before, people do it all the time. I'm not special. I'm not the only one in the world that's going to fail at this. Yeah. So I should be able to succeed. So that's huge. And I think also like that financial commitment lets you commit to yourself too. You're like, all right, I'm putting out a good chunk of change on this. And like if it's, again, make sure you find the right course so that it's actually going to help you. But once you put down that money, it allows you to invest in yourself, which allows you to ask other people for money and feel like you really know what you're doing.
Oh, yeah, I agree. And I think that I kind of had this mindset that I was like going back to school almost, because I was like, you know, it took like a good amount of time to go through all her modules. And I would actually like drive to the BYU campus, sit in the law school building. And I think just putting myself in that mindset where I'm like, hey, I am investing in this education and I'm taking it seriously. Yeah. That was also, I think, a valuable move.
That's super interesting. So you would go listen to the course. You'd like go to the college campus, even though you weren't enrolled. Yeah.
I was always like, am I going to get like kicked out? I don't know. But
no, I actually did the same thing. Cause when I dropped out, I still had access to campus because I had paid tuition. And so I would just go work in the library, and like the Wi-Fi was way faster. It was better than my apartment. And like, it's just funny how all these scrappy things start. Like there's this girl on YouTube, her name's Silicon Valley Girl. And she talks about how she started this like study abroad business, and she'd be in class and then she'd get a call and she'd be like, oh, this is for the business. She'd like run out of class and be like, hi, this is whatever the name of her business is. Like, how can we help you? Like she was in an office, but really she was just some girl in a class. And like, you know, we live in this world where it looks like everything's organized, but the more I'm in business, I'm like, nobody's organized. No, everybody started so scrappy. Yeah.
Totally. Actually, I think that was also a good insight that I had growing up with my dad being a consultant, because he consulted for really big, well-known companies, and he would see the back end, you know, like perfectly because he was consulting for them. And that was kind of an impression that I got often too, that he was like, even though it's like this big corporate business and everyone knows about them, like at the back end, people are hustling, people are like just trying to like Google things as well. Like, you know, like it's not as perfect as you think it is.
Yes. Great point. So you got this course, and by the way, who is the course seller?
Her name is Allison J. Prince. And yeah, I would highly recommend her course, and even just her YouTube channel is great. Cool.
Awesome. We'll link down to her below as well. So you were listening to the course, and then you're still making some money. And how were you making that money? That was just off of Etsy and Instagram?
Yeah, let's see. Etsy Instagram. And then when I started the course, I realized I for sure was going to need a Shopify website. So I got that up, and yeah, I did it all myself, and I'm not a tech person at all. So
Shopify is like, I mean, every tech thing has a learning curve, but Shopify's is pretty low.
yeah, pretty simple. And I mean, I still don't know. I'm sure that it's just interesting because to the average consumer, you probably don't know, but maybe to a developer or designer, they see that it was done by someone who's not a developer. But I mean, most people.
Yeah. And anybody who goes to your site is gonna be like, oh, this looks great.
Right.
Yeah. So you got a Shopify store and you were still selling these same earrings?
Yeah, I was selling the earrings, and then I started realizing that maybe I wanted to get one more product in there. I saw hair clips everywhere, and it was kind of in that same accessory category. But all the hair clips that I was seeing at that time were super glammy and sparkly and pearls, and I was like, I don't even know who wears this kind of stuff. But I mean, and it's fine if they like it. I mean, that's cool. But I was like, there has got to be some that are just simple, clean, and pretty, just, I don't know, cool. But there wasn't. When I looked, I was just like, these are weird.
So more minimalist hair clips.
Yeah.
Got it.
I'm a pretty practical person, but I also like things to look nice. So I was like, there has to be something that's kind of cool. But I wasn't seeing it in the market necessarily. So that's when I went to the manufacturers and I started kind of digging and seeing if that could be a possibility.
Got it. For them to make one custom for you?
Custom, you can also, a lot of times they have things that they're already making that you can be like, oh, I like that, but what about doing it like this? Sometimes it's an in-between custom and stock.
And what does this look like? You on the phone at 1 a.m. talking to somebody in China?
I have actually never even to this day talked to them on the phone, but I would email them. And usually because of the time difference, I would make sure that I was aware of emails coming in around 7 to 10 is when they start emailing me.
7 to 10 at night?
7 to 10 at night.
Okay.
Yeah.
Our time.
Right.
Mountain Standard Time. Got it. So you started, they developed a new line of hair clips for you then?
Kind of. I mean, what I think the genius part is that I actually curated them. So I found all these different assortment of clips that kind of fit in that category, but then I assemble them and no one else is doing that.
Got it. And you know what I love about that is that it's everybody when they start out in business needs somebody to tell them what to do. But there's this big problem where everybody's just doing monkey see, monkey do. Somebody's starting a marketing agency for dentists, so I'm going to go try to market for dentists or chiropractors. This is what happens all the time for me. And I'm sure you see the same thing, these copycat competitors that just go in and sell the exact same thing at a lower price or higher price, whatever it is. So you thinking for yourself, okay, hair clips, but that idea wouldn't have come to you unless you had been 4 or 5 months into the business, right?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And by that point, I kind of understood working with manufacturers a little bit. And I also, I didn't want them. There's different routes to go about it. You can have them assemble it and make it easier on yourself. But I kind of wanted this, because it's not something that I can necessarily patent. I was like, I'm doing this myself.
Got it. So you would ship different parts of the hair clip? I don't know if I understand.
Yeah, it's a little confusing. If you go to the website, you'd probably understand. But I got different styles, but they're all in the same aesthetic of simple, pretty natural colors, and then different shapes, but I would assemble them. And I didn't see that anywhere out there, but I knew. So I have someone doing it for me now. I'm not staying up all night assembling these hair clips, but I did my own packaging and my own assembly. So
wow,
yeah,
super cool. So then you got in the hair clips, and then when did you turn from okay, I own a Shopify store and an Etsy, which by the way, are you still doing the Etsy?
I still have it up. I mean, it kind of just generates sales here and there, and it might as well. I mean, I think at this point I just kind of am leaving it up.
Got it. Yeah. So you had the Shopify, you had the Etsy, you had the Instagram. Then when did you start getting into wholesaling?
That's a good question. Pretty early on, actually, because that was something I was pretty aware of from selling my jewelry at Sundance and also selling at a few other boutique stores around Utah, just a couple. But that was something that was on my mind. And so I kind of just reached out to the contacts I already had here in Utah. And I'm actually pretty good friends with a couple store owners. So I reached out to them and I was like, hey, like, is this something you want to carry in your store? Yeah. And they like loved them. And at first it was literally like me bringing a basket of these like clips like in the store. I'm like, hey guys, which ones do you want to, like, you can take whatever you want. And
you feel like the guy in Hercules. He's like, want to buy a sundial?
Literally, that's what it was. Like, I remember some like hot summer days where I'm like literally like drenched in sweat, like walking to these stores and I'm like just like dumping these piles of clips in the basket. And I'm just like, this is so scrappy. Like, but then I'd bring it in and I was like pretty shocked at the response. They were like, whoa, these are so cool. And and then what I would do is I just let them pick what they wanted. I would quickly calculate. I would just count and be like, okay, well, so it looks like you want 20 pairs. And then I'd go home, write an invoice, email it to them.
Nice.
So yeah, that was the beginning days of wholesale.
It was literally like you driving in your car.
Yeah.
Which same, when I started out, I was like driving, I do marketing for orthodontists, and I like emailed my orthodontist that I went to when I was like 13. I was like, hey, how's it going? Can I come see you? And like I like drove up to his office and we met, and he didn't become a client, but like those initial experiences are so powerful because if you understand how it works on a micro scale and you can do it really scrappy, then you can scale it.
Totally. Yeah, that's actually something that I'm so glad. Like, I don't think I can stress enough how awesome it is that you can practice when you're small and nobody knows about you and you can make so many mistakes and people are like not really expecting a lot from you either, because they're like, the first one of the places was this yoga studio that has like a boutique, and they know me just like personally as like going to practice yoga. And I'm like coming in there with some hair clips. They're like, cool, Nat, like this is a cool project. Like, sure, we'll buy some, And at that point, it's like, I really was like, yeah, I'm not worried about what they're thinking necessarily, but it was great feedback. And they were pretty honest with me too. They're like, oh yeah, these are cool. These probably would sell, or like, like you just get a lot of feedback at first. Yeah.
Everybody should start with research, and like there's ways to make money while you're researching, which is super cool. So that was the beginning of wholesaling, but then it grows, right? Like you don't just have boutiques in Utah, like you have other people outside of the country even, right?
Right. So now basically we are in over 250 stores, I think, at this point, across the US and Canada, and expanding to Europe. We have like one store in Belgium that's kind of an experiment carrying us. And how that works is there are some wholesale sites that are out there that you can apply to. And if you fit their aesthetic, then you can be accepted as a seller. And a lot of retailers go to these sites, and the retailers are drawn to certain wholesale sites based on what their aesthetic for their store is.
Got it. And so give me an example. You were telling me the name of this site. What was it?
Right. So Faire is one. There's a few out there, but I honestly had no idea what it was at first. I mean, I knew what it was. Someone mentioned, like, they're like, oh, the brand style would fit so well with this site. You might as well try and like apply for it. So I, without like really thinking much about it at all, I applied and got on. And I didn't realize until afterward that it is actually a pretty competitive market. So yeah, you have to, I would say like one other lesson learned is that I wouldn't be too antsy to reach out to stores or to like apply to things like that until your brand is somewhat past the scrappy stage, because sometimes you only get one shot to apply. And I feel really grateful that I was a little bit further before someone mentioned that to me, because I think that in the early days, I don't know if I would have been accepted or not.
Got it. Great little nugget. That's cool. And I find the same thing, like clients that would never have hired me 8 months ago or a year ago. Once I've built the brand, they're like, oh yeah, this guy's legit. Like everybody's kind of watching you to see if you're going to be legit. Right. Okay, so you sell wholesale or you list your products wholesale on Faire, and then retailers come and buy that at a wholesale price from you.
Right.
And where do you get those products from, the wholesale ones? Are you like making them in your garage, or are you?
And yeah, those are all manufactured in Asia right now.
Got it. Yeah. So it's, again, like you're a middleman they take it from Asia, then you get it, then you list it there.
Right.
Got it. So super cool. And what an amazing experience to like grow a business from scratch with something that you enjoy. So let me just ask you, kind of to close up here, what's your take on minimalism and business, both first let's talk about sustainability. Like you're really big into that. How do you try to minimize your impact when it comes to like carbon footprint in a retailer, like a goods business, as a product-based business?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's interesting that just the aesthetic of my brand attracts people who are really conscious of that as well. So it's surprising how often I get emails or inquiries asking about that. I was getting it so often that finally I wrote a whole section on my website all about sustainability. Because it's cool too that I think the consumers care, the retailers care, or starting to care at least. Maybe I'm hanging out with the right crowd. I don't know. but so it's a really tricky question, honestly, because there's the ideal and then there's what really happens at the end of the day. And I think for most businesses, the ones that I actually respect the most in the environmentally friendly realm are the ones who are pretty transparent, because I think if someone claims that they're like 100% green and no carbon footprint, it's actually impossible. Yeah. So I think it's really cool when a brand is like, we do this, we're doing this, and it's not perfect process, but like we're constantly trying to improve. Got it. And that's what I'd say that we're at, is that I am really thinking about a lot. A lot of our materials are biodegradable or like a renewable resource. The earrings are cellulose acetate, so they're made out of a wood pulp that is a renewable resource. But I think one thing that people often don't realize is that the packaging is really the biggest waste factor. It's not the product itself, it's actually the packaging and how your manufacturers, how you get that product. And also how you're shipping that out and how much waste goes in.
How do you practice minimalism in your life, or essentialism, I like to call it, where you make sure that your business doesn't take over? And I'm sure there's been periods like that, like everybody has that. And that's kind of why I'm starting this channel, is to be the voice of like, you don't need more money after a certain point. You just need enough to help you be happy and make a full-time income and take care of your family and put some away each month. So how do you make sure that your time all of it doesn't go to the business, and what do you do in your free time?
Oh, that is such a good question, because I think I've been on a couple different ends of the spectrum. And when our wholesale just started to really take off, I felt like I had to do everything myself, because I was like, I am usually someone, I think, who just like, if I want it done right, I just feel like I always have to do it myself. So I was packaging everything myself. Basically everything. And one thing I think I've learned, such a crucial lesson, is that if you can hire the right people or hand over some of that, you will free up your mental energy. And I think you have to be really smart about what you're hiring out and who. All those are like for sure great things to consider. But I know that like I've handed over shipping, I've handed over a few things at this point, and every time I think my mental energy is so much better utilized for the things that are my strengths. So I think hiring out your weaknesses as quickly as you can, as smartly and effectively as you can, is really crucial.
I love that. And then what do you do? Because I have this problem where I hire out my weaknesses, like totally do that, like tedious tasks that I can't seem to get done every day.
Right.
But then it creates like this void where you're like, okay, for you, it's like I was spending 8 hours packaging every day. Now I have 8 extra hours in my day. How do you make sure to fill that with either meaningful work or not work and something that you enjoy?
Yeah, that is a great question. So one thing for me is that I write a daily to-do list every single day. Even if it looks exactly the same as yesterday, there's something for me to like write it down again and be like, okay, this is what I want to get done today. And sometimes that will take me the whole day, and sometimes that will take me 2 hours. And I'm someone, I think it's just my personality. I'm not like crazy structured with myself. And so I know what I need to get done and what's essential. And a lot of times, like, I'll have fun for the rest of the day or spend time with family or friends. And I think also just because I love the creative aspect, for me, it's really crucial to have like unscheduled time, because it actually allows me to be a lot more creative in my business and to be constantly brainstorming new and fun things to do with it.
Yeah, that's great. Greg McKeown, I never know how to say his last name. He says that, essentialists understand that play is essential. It's not just something that you have to like schedule in your day, just like everything else, but it's part of the business process, part of the creativity, like you said. So that's awesome. Any other, like, just from what you've gleaned over the last year and a half, what's the one piece of advice that you would give to anybody starting a business or an e-commerce business? What is it?
I think that honestly, number one is to find a mentor or find a blueprint, because that will save you so much headache. And without that, I don't think that most people will start. And so finding a business, find a brand or a business, or I don't know if it's a product or whatever it is, find someone or something that is what you want to do or similar enough that you can like stalk them, basically, because that for me is crucial. And I think that the longer you do business, the more like you're constantly watching how people are doing things. Like, I feel like everything that I listen to, everything when I'm on the internet, when I'm like, everything is feedback, and everything becomes like, information that is really helpful.
Got it. So find a mentor and find something to model your business after.
Yeah.
Got it. And I really totally agree with that. If you're starting your first business, like, we look at these big businesses like Amazon or, these crazy things where you're like, why didn't I have that idea? Then I'd be a billionaire today, right? And the secret is that the billionaires started other companies first, like Natalia was saying, where they just saw someone like, okay, I could probably do what they're doing. And even though it's not the most original thing, and even though it's not maybe what you're totally passionate about, and you feel like it's your life purpose, it's going to become your education and business that's 10 times more effective than like sitting in a classroom or reading a book, because you actually see how things work. Like, okay, this is how marketing works. I changed my messaging a little bit and it brought in a new customer, or this is how branding works. It becomes your education in a very important way. And then down the line, that's when you start the business that changes the world, or that is your passion, right?
Totally.
Super cool. So where can they find your store online, and also like you on social media if they need to ask any questions? I don't know. You don't do coaching, do you?
No, I don't do coaching. I still feel like I have so much to learn, and maybe in the future I would love to help, I can, but yeah, right now I feel like I'm also a student.
Got it.
So my Instagram is Nat and Noor, spelled Natand Noor. And that's also the website, natandnoor.com.
Great. Check her out. Make sure to buy some of those awesome bracelets and earrings that are all sustainable. And thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Sorry. It's wow.